it comes up with the alert, but
Did the alert make noise?
it's supposed to. I mean, it's the loud. I gotta know as loud as I can. Okay, well, whatever. Um, um, well, I guess I didn't get to that part, but I just wanted to call attention to again. You have that the same call and response theme that constantly happens of like God calls and they respond, "Here I am." Um,
Lift up your eyes and see, all the goats that mate with the flock are striped, spotted, and mottled. For I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and made a vow to me. Now arise, go out from this land, and return to the land of your kindred. Then Rachel.
okay, so basically, it seems like God just says, like, in regards to the sheep and everything, of being like, I saw what Laban did to you. I'm going to make it work. So it's like I said, it's still really not clear as to like whether or not God told him to do the thing with the sticks or not. We'll leave that to the side because we talked about that last time. The thing that I think is interesting here is because, so who is speaking here? The angel of God, and it's the angel of the God that says, "I am the God of Bethel," and so one of the things that I think is really interesting throughout the rest of this chapter is going to be the contrasting understanding of God between Jacob and Laban. And really pay attention to how each of them refer to God, and then how, like, and even like how God's referring to himself here, right? Because God's never referred to himself as the God of Bethel before. I mean, and possibly he couldn't, because that was a moment in Jacob's life, right? But this is also Jacob, right? So the angel is saying this, right? But it's Jacob saying that the angel is saying this, right? Because Jacob is telling Leah and Rebecca this, right? So it's like,
Yeah, because the angel of God said to Jacob, it said to me in the dream.
yeah, right. It says to me. And so you you have here where this is where you're getting that progressive theological understanding of like what's going on with the patriarchs, where they are personally coming to know and understand God. And we've had that argument about whether or not they even know like the name of God. And I talked about how I personally think that they probably didn't. And so anywhere where you see like YHWH in these texts is probably anachronistic, and like Moses or whoever's the original author like writing that back in. But regardless, it doesn't matter because they're making those identifications as being the same thing. So I'll leave that there because we're going to end up talking about that more lower down.
And Leah answered and said to him, Is there any portion or inheritance left to us in our father's house? Are we not regarded by him as foreigners? For he has sold us, and he has indeed devoured our money. All the wealth that God has taken away from our father belongs to us and to our children. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do.
So this is a interesting, even that portion is interesting because it's kind of the first time that Rachel and Leah are on the same page, right? They're no longer kind of going against each other. And also they tell Jacob, do whatever God has told you to do. But as we're going to see in a little bit, Rachel steals Laban's idols. And so it's like, okay, what are the theological ideas that are going on in Rachel's head right now? Like, is she trying to like follow like the same, like clearly she doesn't seem to feel the need to like follow God in the same exact way as her husband does. She seems to think that like she has the freedom to kind of do it on her own. And so you kind of get a little bit of the sense of the cultural idea, even from that, of the way people treated gods at the time. Um, Seems like it was very common for people to treat gods very like personal, like I have this one, right? Um, and and if you like read like a John Walton or something like that, he talks about how like you have gods at different layers. So you have household gods, you have communal like or clan, I guess the next stage up would be clan gods, city gods or something like that, national gods, and then like supreme gods and stuff like that. And people rarely thought that those gods transitioned stations. And so it would have been weird for them. It would have been, and this is one of the things why it's so weird, right? Because they identify, right? We saw this like with Abraham. They identify their God with the Most High. And that would have been weird for them. And so when, and I know I'm talking about this early before it comes up, but when Rachel steals the household gods of her father, she probably doesn't think that she's doing anything blasphemous, right? She probably thinks that she's doing something mean to her dad, right? Like that's probably there. But she probably doesn't think that she's doing anything blasphemous. It's a thing that they have to develop in the culture to get people to realize, no, this is blasphemous. Don't do this. This is a wrong thing to do. And part of how I think the writers are getting the Israelites to understand that is precisely what happens in this story. Okay. So I wanted to have that ahead of time.
Arose and set his sons and his wives on camels. He drove away all his livestock, all his property that he had gained, the livestock in his possession that he had acquired in Paddan Aram, to go to the land of Canaan to his father Isaac. Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel stole her father's household gods. And Jacob tricked Laban the Aramean by not telling him that he intended to flee. He fled with all that he had and arose and crossed the Euphrates and set his face toward the hill country of Gilead. When it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob had fled, he took his kinsman with him and pursued him for 7 days and followed close after him into the hill country of Gilead. But God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream by night and said to him, "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad."
Okay. So so Jacob now performs a trick against Laban, similar to the trick that Laban just performed to him, right? Laban did the whole switcheroo on the flock and then went 3 days away. And now Jacob does a trick with I guess you could say a portion of Laban's clan, which is definitely the way that Laban sees it, as we're going to see a little bit lower, and reverses that trick by moving 3 days away from him. And so you now have this separation of the clan starting. And so one of the things that we discussed way long ago, whenever we were talking about like those, see, that's the stay in the call. All right, got it this time. When we were talking about those genealogies and about how it might be conceivable that you could think of those genealogies as like the genealogies of clans and groups.
And there's several names being left out.
Right. And we don't know. So how do you know when a different clan should be listed? I'm going to argue that this story right here, especially what happens at the end, is exactly the kind of event that would occur. Because remember, what I said, I was like, it's when you separate, when your group separates, and you like leave your father and mother, right? It's not just you got married and have a kid. It's the leaving part. When you leave, that's whenever you have your own new identity. You have to get away from your parents, away from that structure in order to have a new identity. And I think it's going to become real clear as we get to the bottom of this. And I think it makes a lot more sense that this is going on whenever you put it into a lot of the other symbolic context of what we've been talking about, which is this is them coming out of a mini exodus, or sorry, not mini exodus, a mini exile, right? Because they've been exiled out of the land and now they're coming back into the land. And as you come back into the land, a lot of different things are going to happen, which I will save for next week, because we're going to see that rejoining of things coming back together. Like a lot of things are going to end up coming back together next week, as they prepare to go back into the land. But as this kind of first step of getting into land, they're going to start taking steps to really start to be identified, to have an identity that's separate from, in some senses, even separate from Abraham. And we'll look at that. Where was I? Okay. But then you also have this event of God coming to Laban, and basically telling Laban, like, watch your step here. Really don't do anything. In regards to him. And it's that kind of it reminds me of the like do not touch the Lord's anointed thing of like, kind of what gets like how David ends up like treating Saul, like just don't do anything, don't do like. And it's also similar to the Abimelech event where God comes in a dream to the other party. And so the person that's the prophet or whatever, which in this case is Jacob, maybe doesn't know what's going on, doesn't see God moving, but that doesn't mean that God isn't moving. God is moving behind the scenes, even whenever you don't see him doing stuff. Okay. All right. We're going to keep going.
And Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country, and Laban with his kinsmen pitched tents in the hill country of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done that you have tricked me and driven away my daughters like captives of the sword? Why did you flee secretly and trick me and did not tell me, so that I might have sent you away with mirth and songs, with tambourine and lyre? And why did you not permit me to kiss my sons and my daughters farewell? Now you have done foolishly. It is in my power to do you harm. But the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, 'Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad.' And now you have gone away because you longed greatly for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods?" Jacob answered and said to Laban, "Because I was afraid, for I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force. Anyone with whom you find your gods shall not live. In the presence of our kinsmen, point out what I have that is yours and take it." Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them.
Okay. So I find this whole kind of speech by Laban is like, it's a little bit rich, right? Because just in the last chapter, Jacob asks to leave. Jacob's like, "Can I leave?" And actually, anytime that anyone in the history of Laban in the Bible has asked, "Can I leave?" Laban's like, "Nah, like you got to stay." So Laban has a history of not letting people leave. And so he's like, oh yeah, I would have let you leave and I would have been really nice to you. And it's like, okay. I also think that this line about it is in my power to do you harm is interesting because he's really trying to do that, like the best like example of like an abusive relationship of like the carrot stick thing. Like I could be really nice to you, or I could also be really mean to you. But it's also interesting because I think that it's actually Laban that's scared here. It's like Jacob might have been scared a little bit about, right, because that's what he said. He's like, I was afraid that you take your daughters from me and all this stuff. But it's actually Laban. And to me, that's so reminiscent of, because remember, what did I say this is? This is an example of the return to the land. What happened when the Israelites are walking through the wilderness? They're walking around, they're scared of all of the other nations around them. And they're like, all these nations are going to destroy us. But what's actually going on is all of those nations are terrified of them. They're like, if those Israelites come over here, they're going to like kill us all. So much so that whenever they show up to Jericho, Rahab is like, they're going to kill us all if I don't like side with them. And so, crap, yeah, I'm going to hide you guys and like I'm going to take care of you guys. Like, just don't kill me and my family. And they're like, done. And so there's this juxtaposition about our view and our perception of the world and what everybody else's view and perception of the world is. And we think that we're like downtrodden and not dangerous. But actually, we're really dangerous. Why do I say that Laban is the one that's actually scared? Down low, before, like after this, what's going to happen is they're going to sign a covenant. The covenant is going to be neither one of our people groups can pass this point. Whose idea is it for the covenant? It's Laban's. It's not Jacob's. It's Laban's. Because Laban realizes not only does he have the ability to take all of my wealth and God has blessed him, but his God also showed up to me in a dream. I don't want to mess with that because
I don't even pray to this guy.
like yeah, exactly. Right? It's like, I don't want to mess with that. I've been like, Laban's kind of been playing with fire here and flirting with disaster for a while. But it's eventually going to get to a point, and I talked about how, in my opinion, Laban is like the stand-in for scummy people in the church. And it's like, eventually, even scummy people in the church, like, they might be doing like some questionable practices. But once people kind of figure out their deal, they kind of recognize, I can't keep doing this. Like if I keep doing this, I'm going to get burned. And then there ends up being separation typically. But that's what I see going on here. You also have this thing with the gods. Jacob is going to be, in my opinion, a little bit over boastful here. This, to me, this is really reminiscent of just don't swear on like there's a whole larger section of the Bible about not swearing on stuff. The one that I can't remember what his name is, but there's some like military commander that's like, yeah, it's something like that. Yeah, right. Yeah, like if I win the battle, I'll kill the first thing that walks through my threshold, and it's his daughter. It's like, okay, that was stupid. This is really reminiscent of that. Fortunately, it doesn't have the same effect, but also kind of does, because Rachel pretty soon is gonna die in childbirth, and so maybe there's a connection there. I don't know.
Wow, yeah.
But so here we go.
So Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and into the tent of the 2 female servants, but he did not find them. And he went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them in the camel's saddle and sat on them. Laban felt all about the tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, "Let not my lord be angry that I cannot rise before you, for the way of women is upon me." So he searched, but did not find the household gods. Then Jacob became angry and
Okay. So, so this whole thing about the household gods. So the word for household gods is teraphim. Like I said earlier, the big question for me is, why does Rachel take the idols? We don't fully know why she does. You can find lists of like possible motivations. The one that I like the best is that it was possibly to prevent him from using divination to find out where they were going. Why would I think that? One, in the previous chapter, Laban says the line about, "I found out through divination that God has blessed me through you." So right there, you just have Laban being like, "I do divination practices." Okay, there you go. Two, teraphims, we know from other places in scripture, are used in divination practices. They're used for like whenever like you're consulting the gods. I think you have like a line about like Nebuchadnezzar like consults like the teraphim, and so it's one of the things that they do. There's a lot of debate about what they actually are, how big they are. Obviously, they have to be small enough to be portable and hidden under if you sit on them. But also, there's a story later on about one of David's wives uses a teraphim to trick a bunch of Saul's guards into thinking that David is sleeping in a bed. And so people are like, well, so it's got to be like, so it's like putting a rock underneath a pillow, like and blanket thing, like that trick from like movies and stuff. And it's like, yeah, it's basically what it is. And so people are like, okay, maybe they're like, it's possible that, and they might vary in size. They might be just like a bust, like just like a head or something like that. And also there might just be different versions. And I think that's probably the most likely, is just that, okay, there are different versions. Yeah. Yeah. You got your poor person like terror events, and you got your like rich people like ones. Like, I don't know. So that's probably what it is. But I think that it's probably that this story is probably in there. That the purpose that this is serving is because this problem of wives of Israelites bringing in foreign gods is a repeating problem in Israel's history, right? It happens while they are like if Moses is writing this, it's happening while they're going back through the wilderness. It happens while they're in. It happens when they're in the land. It happens to Solomon. Like, it's one of the big problems with Solomon. So like, it's a reoccurring issue. Okay. And so it kind of makes sense that there would be a story about like, okay, this is like an example of when this kind of ball started getting rolling, and right. And also that it's not a good thing. And one of the things that is kind of interesting is that I guess the closest like etymology connection that people can make on the actual word like teraphim is something like, okay, I guess it's something like wasted rags, okay? And it would kind of, to me, it would kind of make sense as to why it's a little bit of a like it's a little bit of a joke on the writer's part about what's going on here, right? Because what's going on here, she uses the fact that she's menstruating. Either that's true or a lie, we don't know, but that's what she's using to cover up these gods. They didn't have tampons back in the day, so if she actually was, they'd be using rags. So the idea is the writer is trying to equate, like, I don't see how you can get around this. They're trying to equate the household gods of other nations, other people with menstrual rags, like, and trying to say, like, they're kind of an equivalent value, right? And it's like, okay, that's him trying to be like, these things are bad and like these things are trash. And also that they're like impure and like unclean and you need to get rid of them. Okay. Like, does that make sense? It's plausible, like connection there. Okay. Yeah, like kind of crude, and I didn't want to like like.
I mean, unnecessarily crude though to make that point. But I was kind of wondering though, like, if Rachel's sole purpose of, and that seems to make sense with the take. Of course, you've done research and I haven't. But if that's the reason for her taking the guys, to be like, oh, I don't want him to find out through some weird witchcrafty thing. Could she not have just hidden them somewhere where Laban couldn't have found them, or
just destroyed them? Yeah. Right, and that's why it's not like a complete answer. Like, I'm in no way saying that. It's because my idea is just, if that's what she's thinking, just destroy them. But it's also right, exactly. They could have value to her. She could legitimately think that there's nothing wrong in her having them. Right.
Oh, I was old. She probably grew up.
Oh, right. And also, like, and again, it's not like it's arguable about whether or not we should even be like using the term like monotheism and stuff, right? But like, even if like that's the goal, that is like the progressive goal of like the Old Testament, is to get Jews to that point. There's no way that 3 generations in that like they would have had perfect understanding, and especially like the wife of Jacob would have had perfect understanding that like this is not something that we should be doing. Mm-hmm. It took them long enough to get around the fact that they're not supposed to marry like their cousins and their sisters, like, which they're doing, but the law specifically forbids, right? And so like, I don't want to do what a lot of commentaries do of being like, this is just a straight example of like of Rachel sinning, like, like, and we've had this before about a lot of things, about me being like, that's you taking like our or like a later understanding of sin and applying it to the people at the time, and I don't know that that's fair. It doesn't mean that it's good, and I'm not trying to be like, we should bring back household gods. Like, no, like that's not what I'm saying. But just don't apply motivations to the characters in the story that aren't there. It's kind of my thing. Anything else? All right, we'll keep going.
Laban. Jacob said to Laban, "What is my offense? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? For you have felt through all my goods. What have you found of all your household goods? Set it here before my kinsmen and your kinsmen, that they may decide between us two. These 20 years I have been with you, your ewes and your feet."
So I'll pause it right there. The only point I wanted to make there is that it's interesting. You have this set it here before me in front of my kinsmen. The same idea of like a public trial, which is very similar to what happened with the whole incident with the Hittites and everything. Like, bring it before all of the people that are around here, and like we'll all decide what's going on.
Male goats have not miscarried, and I have not eaten the rams of your flocks. What was torn by wild beasts I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it myself. From my hand you required it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was. By day the heat consumed me, and the cold.
So that line about what was torn by wild beast I did not bring to you, I bore the loss of it myself. I read in one commentary where they were saying that like it would have been common for shepherds, like if they brought the carcass of like a sheep back, they wouldn't have to like pay for it.
Yeah.
Because in order to get it back, they would have had to gotten it back from the beast that attacked them. And so the fact that they have it showed that they fought off like the beast. And Jacob is saying, I didn't even do that. I just straight up replaced it with one from my own. And that makes sense to me as to being the thing that's going on here. And so I just wanted to like highlight that to make that more clear.
By night, and my sleep fled from my eyes. These 20 years I have been in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been on my side, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God saw my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you last night.
Okay, so this is. I need to do a like more deeper dive, but I don't think that this like phrase shows up really anywhere else other than this chapter. But it's a really cool name for God, which is the fear of Isaac.
Yeah.
And it's going to show up down low, and it's more significant down low. But I just want to highlight that I don't have like a bunch to say about it like right now. But I guess I already mentioned the wages 10 times the 6 years of flock, and so okay. But you also have the God saw my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you last night. So this is Jacob kind of calling out and stepping into, right, because we talked about how he's trying to progress on this. I mean, we don't really know, kind of reading into, but he's trying to progress on that, like actually embracing being a prophet kind of a thing, embracing being a priest and as a person that's following after God, and he's trying to embrace the rules and not just do all this trickery stuff that he used to do. Although he just did perform a trick, but it was a, I guess you could call it, he's trying to do these more God ordained tricks, right? Like, so the thing with the sticks is a more God ordained trick because it's within the rules of like what they established. And then God told him to go back to the land. So, okay, so he's listening to God to go back to the land, which is, kind of a trick because he didn't tell Laban about it. But he's now like affirming what other people have said and seeing God move. And that's where I think that kind of partial of, like I said, I do think that Jacob is kind of overreacting here, especially with a lot of the like, I'll kill whoever has it, and see, nobody sinned, you didn't found it, but like kind of secretly we know that sin did occur, right? And so he's kind of overreacting here, but he's also like embracing this idea of, no, I'm doing things right. It's my tzedek, it's my righteousness, my honesty that we talked about last time. It's like, those are the things that are validating me. I'm validated in this, and God validated me to you. Like, what are you doing? So he's really stepping into that. And I think that's, although it's a bit misaligned here, I do think that is the right thing for him to do. That's what I was trying to say.
Then Laban answered and said to Jacob, "The daughters are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks, and all that you see is mine."
Oh, did I miss the line? Oh, I wanted to highlight it. This is the problem where I can't have my notes and this stupid recording app up at the same time. Because when does Laban say? Does he say it right then? I thought he said it earlier.
Do not want to spoil it by saying
No, there's a line where Laban says, you took, he's like, you took my sons and my daughters away from me.
oh,
Yeah, like, yeah, oh, yeah. It was like way at the beginning, right?
yeah.
That was going to be one of my main points. So I mentioned
in verse 28. Why did you not permit me to kiss my sons and my daughters for long?
Thank you. Okay.
Now you have been bullied.
Right. Okay. And so that was going to be my whole point of that question, which I botched.
Which one?
My question was going to be, which sons is he talking about?
Right.
Does
Yeah.
he see Jacob's kids as his own?
Yes,
That's how I read
obviously.
it.
And this is where I was talking about. Remember how I said my point about this is a story about the clan separating? It's precisely because Laban identifies everybody that is under him with him. And so it doesn't matter that those sons are not his sons. They're a part of his group. They're his sons, right? And this is where and like we talked about earlier about like it made sense even for whenever like because Abraham is doing this too with like his servant. The servant isn't his son, but he's like, my heir is whatever of Damascus, and it's like his butler, right? And we're like, and to me, this just shows he's like, you're in Laban's view, Laban is like, you are ripping my clan apart. What are you doing? You're ripping my clan apart. You're taking my sons and my daughters away from me, but they're not his. And this is showing how you separate out from the people, from the lineage that comes before you. Why is that important? Because as the mini Exodus or many return from exile, like in, I guess also Exodus, right? Of coming back into the land, that's exactly what coming back into the land means. It's becoming God's people, right? It's defining them as a nation. And so even that line about the sons and the daughters is the giveaway. Yeah. I meant to mention that earlier and forgot to. So we'll keep going.
"But what can I do this day for these my daughters or for their children whom they have borne? Come now, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me." So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. And Jacob said to his kinsmen, "Gather stones." And they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jegar-Sahadutha, but Jacob called it Gilead. Laban said, "This heap is a witness between you and me today."
Okay. Just I don't want to go too far before I forget to mention. So again, like I said, it's Laban's idea, but Jacob, being the super strong guy that he is, moves another rock. And both of those names there, the Sahadutha and Gilead, both mean like witness heap.
In Hebrew and Aramaic.
Yep.
Therefore he named it Gilead, and Mizpah, for he said, The Lord watch between you and me when we are out of one another's sight. If you oppress my daughters, or if you take wives besides my daughters, although no one is with us, see, God is witness between you and me.
Okay. So if you remember whenever we talked about what covenants were, back long ago, whenever we first talked about it with when Abraham makes the covenant, this is like a more, and Abraham made some other covenants with other people in the land, right? And they're pretty much always peace treaties, right? And so like that's what this is. This is a peace treaty. And what you do, right? What maybe you guys remember this, but I'm gonna go over it. What you do is, because people are like, a covenant is just a contract. No, it's specifically, it's a contract that is enforced by the gods. Okay. And so what you would do is you would so both sides would come together, and both sides would bring their gods like to the meeting, right? And they would serve as witnesses. And then for exactly this reason, then whenever you're not near each other, whenever you're away from each other, if you do anything to break that covenant, your own gods will punish you, right? And about why that's significant and is unique with the covenant at Sinai and the covenant that Israel makes with God, because you have this very weird thing going on where God himself is making the covenant with the people, but God also serves as the witness to that covenant. And so even in these covenant forming like events that happen throughout the Old Testament, you see this kind of differentiation of like, I want to say persons, right? Because I'm trying to like be like, it's the Trinity, right? But I don't necessarily want to use that term because I don't know if like people at the time would have like used that term. But like these different kind of like manifestations or instances of Yahweh are performing these roles, and then that's why you what you then do is that you then take you're supposed to actually write down the covenant, and then you then take that and you take it back to your like whatever the temple is of your gods or wherever your gods are at. And if your god was a household god, the temple was the hearth, by the way. This is why they're like gods of the hearth. Look, the hearth is the it's the altar, right? It makes sense. It's the place where you burn things and like smoke goes up. You do the same thing at like altars, right? So it makes sense. Part of what is interesting is that in this story, Laban doesn't have his gods, right? They just got stolen. They're still there, right? But like are currently being sat on, right? But like but he's still going to invoke them, and really pay attention to the difference between the words that Laban uses versus the words that Jacob uses.
Then Laban said to Jacob, see this heap and the pillar which I have set between you and me. This heap is a witness, and the pillar is a witness, that I will not pass over this heap to you, and you will not pass over this heap and this pillar to me to do harm. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac, and Jacob offered a sacrifice in the hill country and called his kinsmen to eat bread. They ate bread and spent the night in the hill country. Early in the morning, Laban arose and kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned home.
All right. So this is the only instance in the Bible where that phrase, the Elohim of Nahor, is ever mentioned. If you don't remember who Nahor is Abraham's brother. Also, and so it's Laban's father, right? There's actually two Nahors, if I remember the family tree correctly. Their father is Terah, and actually, I think Terah's father might be named Nahor. And so could be referencing like either one, right?
In my version, it says the God of your grandfather Abraham and the God of my grandfather Nahor.
So yeah. So
It's interesting because
so
I don't
Laban
think.
Right. Yeah. Doesn't that make sense?
I don't think Nahor. I think Nahor is Laban's father. I don't think he's his grandfather.
Just reading what it says here.
But okay, well, interesting. Anyways, the thing that's more interesting to me is the fact of compare that ordering of how he says it. The God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of your Av, which is a father. He lists Elohim 3 different times, and compare that to whenever it says something like the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? You have this differentiation of one God for 3 different people that make up the line versus one God of one person in line, one God of another person in line, one God of another person in line. Jacob's response to Laban in that is that he's not going to swear by those Elohim that were just mentioned. He swears by the fear of his father Isaac. And so you have this same picture of what I was just talking about both sides kind of bring, and it's not like Jacob Jacob's not like rejecting the God of Abraham here, right? Because he refers to the God of Abraham in other places. Jacob does, but Jacob is trying very purposefully to make the God that he follows different from the understanding that Laban has of these multitude of gods. And by doing that, he's formalizing a covenant that does separate them. He doesn't, like, you could almost think that if he were to swear by the same gods in the way that he's listing there, that maybe there would be this idea that they would come back together. But the fact that he swears by, I'm putting this in quotes, a different God, or a different, what should be understood as a different understanding of God, he's permanently separating himself from Laban and also Laban's understanding of God. And that's, I think that's like and that's why I said, I think that's the real beginning of being like, we're going to be different. We're going to be a holy people. And that's what's going to lead into this next story of what we're going to talk about next week, whenever Israel actually becomes Israel. That was the last thing I was going to say.
So I found a good family tree of it. Terah had Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Haran was Lot. But Terah's father was Nahor. So Terah named one of his sons after his father.
Yes, that's what I thought.
So when Laban here says the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, he's referring to Abraham's brother Nahor, not the super high up Nahor.
Yeah. That's what I thought.
So then in this case, this Nahor that he references is Laban's grandfather. So that's the deal.
Oh,
Yeah, there's a Nahor not shown here on this one, unfortunately. But
oh,
he says-
there's a Bethuel there.
Oh, yeah,
that I
Bethuel
missed.
was the name of
Okay.
his son. Yeah.
Okay,
Ooh,
so
this isn't important.
it was there. I missed it. My mistake.
It should be that confusing, but it took me like 3 look. Like I looked at it, we didn't have enough. Like, I got it.
So your Bible is correct. You can continue reading it.
Thank you for your-
Okay, you're welcome. His picture on his phone just confirmed that. So it's
Probably
good.
a better one.
Well, I can't trust Google.
So are there
Google
any
didn't make this family change.
Questions?
Oh, it's actually Catholic resources.
questions, comments, concerns, ideas?
Yeah, I do like the part where Laban says, like, if you would have just told me you were leaving, I would have thrown you a big party. And
Yeah.
I guess, like, I know if it was me and like in Jacob's shoes, I would have been like, I tried leaving like a couple years ago and you just said no.
See, I think the problem is he asked if he could leave.
Yeah, you just have to.
You
do
told-
it.
told-
I'm leaving.
Ah,
He would've been like,
so what we're learning from this story is
You're asking me.
don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. Is that what we're learning here?
Better
I hate that lesson, by the way, but I guess that's what we're learning here.
And this is the last we see of Laban, right?
I think so. Yeah, I don't think they go. I don't think there are any more references to him. Hmm. Yeah, pretty much.
Ever since he showed up, he's been causing trouble.
Hey, he was a good source of daughters,
And
I guess. I don't know, and sisters. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, we don't really see him again. Oh no, that's for next week. Sorry, I was gonna reference something that happens in the next chapter. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff with like the place names, but I think a lot of it is it's not really important to like this story, but obviously like all of these place names show up later in other places in the Bible, and like that's again part of the reason why it mentions the different place names is because it's like because the people at the time are living there and they're around these things and they're like, oh, so this is the thing that happened here. Okay, cool. Blah 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 blah. So that happens a bunch, but yeah, I'll go ahead and stop it there.